one of the best books about sort of, I don't want to say, well, the end of the Republican Party, as we've noted in our lifetime. And I think you've covered Tim Miller's career. He worked for Jeb Bush. He's now running one of the most effective Republican-oriented campaigns for Joe Biden and against Donald Trump. And he writes this in the Bulwark on the Kool-Aid Convention. He says, quote, "The RNC has taken what the party's worst critics have to say about them and decided to wear it as a badge of pride. It's the orange man bad of political platforms. We are Trumpists, no more, no less. We believe in nothing. Love it or leave it." Do you think there's anyone left to feel any shame about that? I mean, I know Burr's dealing with his own legal challenges, but anyone left that is not okay with that? I mean, Portman is obviously fine to let this become his legacy, but is there anyone sort of in the mold of a Paul Ryan? And I remember all your careful reporting in your book about sort of his policy heart breaking as Trump came in and obviously was ignorant and indifferent to all those conservative principles Paul Ryan adhered to. But are there any Paul Ryans left? Anyone who cares?
You know, Nicole, I'd say this. It's not an accident that Paul Ryan retired after 2018. You know, as I reported at the time and as I wrote about in the book, you know, he talked with people around him and said pretty plainly, look, I cannot be in office while this guy's on the ballot again in 2020. I refuse to put myself in a situation where I have to be defending what he's doing or turning a blind eye, whatever one's worse. And when you look at the 2020 Republican Party as compared to the 2016 Republican Party, obviously there's no question that the GOP as a whole is a far more concentrated Trump-friendly entity than it was 4 years ago. You know, Mark Sanford, gone. Justin Amash, you know, left the party. Bob Corker, gone. Jeff Flake, gone and endorsed Joe Biden this week, of course. And the list goes on. But there have been so many high-profile, you know, prominent Republican defections over the last 4 years, that what it leaves you with is a party that is, on the one hand, yes, certainly much friendlier to Trump and more disposed to be enabling of him, but also it leaves you with a party that sort of lacks the intestinal fortitude to stand up, even at times when some of these folks really would otherwise feel compelled to, because they understand that it's going to cost them their jobs. We've seen this play out time and time and time again, to the former Congresswoman's point a moment ago. So I do think that there are a handful of Republicans left who have very strong feelings about Trump and who at some point will make those feelings known. But I think for the majority of them right now, they just don't think that it's worth it, because in large part, some of them have already become convinced that he's going to lose in November and that there's going to be a reckoning very soon inside the party and that they want to have a seat at the table. And they feel like if they speak out against him now, then they will be banished from the party post-November.
You know, Peter, I want to ask you about the political implications of this. When you're running as a TV guy, it is okay that George W. Bush and President Obama's defense secretary chooses the other candidate who was the Secretary of State. It is okay if you're running as a TV guy to have the military voice concern about you. But when you're running as the incumbent president of a nation that has lost 180,000 Americans to a global pandemic that was solvable, you know, we didn't have to be the country that did the worst with COVID. And when you're running as a president who's been rebuked by your former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, your former Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, your current chairman of the Joint Chiefs who participated in your photo op, it is different. It is a different indictment when you lead the government that's attacking you.
Right, but he doesn't think he is leading the government that's attacking him at this point. What is still running as that outsider, right? He is running as the outsider and the guy taking on the deep state. He happens to be doing it from the Oval Office, but he's not changed his political stance. That may not be tenable, as you say. He is the president, and that's not usually something an incumbent running for a second term can pull off. But he might be able to. In fact, earlier I said the beginning and end. I didn't mean end of the presidency, by the way. I meant end of his first term. We don't know this is the end of his presidency. We ought to be careful about jumping too forward. But I think you're right. He is trying to do something that most incumbents have never, or in fact, I can't think of any incumbent who's managed to do it, which is to run as an outsider, run as a challenger, in effect, to the government that he himself is at least ostensibly in charge of. And it's a feat that only he might be able to pull off, because in 4 years he's been in Washington as the president, he has never actually sort of accepted that he was in charge of the government, right? He thinks that he can do whatever he can under the Article 2, but he has constantly been at war with the law enforcement, with intelligence agencies, with the State Department, and sometimes is inside his own White House. Just this week, he's quoted by Jerry Seib in the Wall Street Journal as saying that he still feels like an outsider, even within his own party. And Tim, of course, has chronicled that very well in his book and in his pieces. I think that this is still somebody who has affected a hostile takeover of the Republican Party, but is yet to, completely come to terms with that.
Donald, let me give you the last word. And the only thing I differ with Peter on is it is his job. And as much as I wish it wasn't, he is the country's commander-in-chief. He's been rebuked by all those officials I just named. And all the people coming out now to add momentum to Joe Biden's convention week are either people that work for him or people that used to work for him and left after what they saw. I mean, it is more than just saying, I've still got my outsider cred. He is the most briefed. He has access to the most sensitive state secrets, for better or for worse. And he's the commander-in-chief of our country's military. And everyone who saw him up close has come out and denounced him. No one has left and endorsed him. Everyone that's left has denounced him.
Well, I mean, there is the rub, and I think Peter has it right, that this is a president, and you can see from this convention that is clearly running as the grievance, the aggrieved outsider, the challenger, the one who's the underdog. And I don't know whether he can pull it off, but that clearly is the campaign that he's running. And so it seems entirely appropriate, if you're going to run that kind of message campaign to your base that believes the same, then you will continue to butt up against a government that you control, a government that you've been running for 3.5 years. You continue to attack the previous administration when you've had the reins for 3.5 years. But that's the kind of campaign that Donald Trump is running. And I think that these Republicans who are coming out now are doing it in the hopes that they're going to be the ones to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, to rebuild the Republican Party after this disaster. And I don't think that Donald Trump really cares what he leaves in his wake.
Donna Edwards, Peter Baker, Tim Alberta, a pleasure to talk to all of you. Thank you for spending some time with us. When we come back with messages of anger and vitriol and dystopian warnings about Joe Biden's America, who are Trump's speakers trying to appeal to? His shaky